amp. I like it. One thing I will say, I mean, what that's bringing up for me is that when we moved here to Goshen, Massachusetts, I um I really didn't quite understand the culture here, and I actually felt diminished. I felt that people didn't understand me as a musician. I played slightly different. There's a difference between West Coast and East Coast, and on the West Coast, I was pretty popular in the Bay Area. Here, nobody knew me, nobody cared about me, et cetera, and so forth. So I felt like, at least internally, I had to build myself back up. That was hard.
That is hard. And in industry, people move from company to company, organization to organization, and construction, a lot of times you're following the work. Like that's one of the big reasons why I moved all around the country. And you feel like that every single time. It's like, but you have to rebuild the trust, right? And the
Yeah,
relationships.
yeah. And that was tough because, for example, I got asked to play at the last minute at some benefit, for that was a pretty big benefit, but they didn't have my amp. They didn't even ask me what kind of amp. I just had to come in at the last minute with a guitar plugged into an amp, and I really did not like that because I didn't sound good, and I know when I sound good and when I don't sound good. So that was a sort of choice I could tell that other people were making for me, and I determined not to let that happen again. So this time the first question I asked is, okay, what kind of an amp are you going to have there for me? This is what I use. This is what I need you guys to get. So it may sound kind of prima donna-ish from the outside, but actually it's not. It's a really serious consideration, because you want June Millington. So if you want June Millington, you got to want my sound. It's not because like I'm so amazing or whatever. I've got a certain way that I play, and I've got a
Mhm.
certain sound, and how I achieve that is step by step: right guitar, right amp, right mic, right PA. I mean,
Right. Well, and I mean, to your point, there's if we're gonna ask you to be there, we got to set you up to succeed.
yeah,
And that's something that I think is we could probably look at that as an onion to peel, right? If we're
Mhm.
gonna ask people to be there, we got to set them up to succeed. And
Right.
it could mean anything, whether it's the right amp or the right tools or the right,
Yeah.
in construction, it could be the right safety gear, for goodness sake.
That's right. Absolutely right. There are certain steps you have to take to succeed in anything. I mean, if I were a fisherman off the coast of Peru, I'd be doing certain things that I don't think about
Yeah,
right now, right? But you have to plan to succeed, and you have to work at it. Simply, simply.
I like that. I'm going to definitely highlight that clip. You have to plan to succeed and you have to work at it. And it's true. And and it's not easy. And do you find that over time your definition of success has changed?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. When I look back, one of my definitions, well, I'll just give you a bunch of the early ones: to just be able to play chord, right? A bar chord on guitar, to be able to sing. Number three, to be able to talk to people. That was really, really difficult for me because I'm half Yankee American. My dad's from Vermont, my mom's from the Philippines. And so it was kind of awkward for me to be biracial, starting in the early 50s. I was born in 48. So how to talk to people was a big issue for me, but I did learn how to do it. Now you can't stop me. I love talking. But how I got over that threshold was a really big deal, and it was a long process.
Like, do you think it was particularly hard because maybe people just didn't know how to deal with you? Like they were uncomfortable too?
No, I think it was racism and misogyny, quite
Uh-oh.
frankly. The RM of life.
You
Yeah,
think so?
I think for to a large extent that people didn't really care about me. They didn't really see me. I mean, I'm half Filipina. I fall between the cracks. Um, and I began to really realize that probably in my 40s. I could feel it into my 30s. I didn't even really start to talk till my mid 20s.
Mm. So when did you have words to describe it? Like the language to talk about it. When did that happen?
I think that probably started my 50s, 60s. I'm 74 now. And now I find it easy to describe. But, you know, in order to be able to describe this as something, you need to be able to step away from it and see it. And that was the molting part for me that allows or allowed me to begin seeing what's going on, you know, what is
Right.
going. So that was, I think that took the most time. I mean, before that, I was quiet. I watched. I mean, there was a lot going on around me, and I was in Fanny, and I played with Chris Williamson and women's music, and political and cultural paradigm shifts were happening all around me. And some people tried to talk and say what was happening. I didn't do that. I watched what was happening, and then I let the information come to me. So an awful lot of time was spent in doing that. And once I had an idea, plus I had been studying Tibetan Buddhism starting around late 70s into the 80s, and that also answered a lot of questions for me. So the two coupled together, being able to distance myself from my life and being able to survey what I was actually seeing and studying the nature of truth through Buddhism, have saved my life. Yeah.
So, and that's really interesting that, stepping back and looking through a different lens, kind of looking at the same picture through a different lens can so often spark that new idea or that new insight, right? That's kind of where innovation comes from. I do a lot of training and leadership development. And one of the things that I tell people is that, you could have seen the same stuff 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but here you are today. You're a different person today. It's going to mean something different to you today because of your experiences.
Yes. Um, you know, a little bit of it was shocking when I realized, oh, I really think I can figure this stuff out. I just got to stay with it, you know. That was a big internal paradigm shift. Because previous to that, I just felt really confused. I'm half American, half Filipina. So in the Philippines, I was confusing. Here it was confusing. But when we started to play music, we finally found the breadcrumbs that would lead us to the center of everything, actually, not just the center of me or my sister Jean, but everything. Music leads, to the heart and the architecture of the universe.
Do you think that that's somewhat because of the introspection that it takes to write and produce and deliver good music? It takes a lot of thought and right brain,
Yeah,
left brain
yeah,
too.
yeah. Well, I've been doing that pretty much since I was about 10, 11, 12, right? Right, starting to write songs in my head. So, not so much that I don't think. One of the biggest accelerants for my learning who I am about the universe was teaching our rock and roll girls camps here at IMA. I always say I'm a teacher because you're going to come up against all your stuff, especially if you're teaching teenage girls and you're off the grid in terms of how you're presenting stuff. I mean, this is basically, we call it rock and roll, but it's just a paradigm for being fearless enough to try to get off that old track. Because I'll tell you, the girls come in, they do not want to be in school. So, how am I going to seduce them into music and into the joy of themselves and creating and making new girlfriends, etc.? It's a process that is boots on the ground. You got to be, you got to get it pretty fast because our teen camps are only 10 days. So that really has taught me about a lot. It's taught me how to get to the center of whatever's happening for me and for each of the girls, and then the entire camp. That's much
Right. Oh, there are so many. What do you have in your mind when you're trying to resonate with a new girl in your camp? Like, what's your thought process? I am sure that you have a system that you're employing in your head when you're like, okay, what am I observing and how am I thinking this through so I can resonate with this individual?
to tell you the truth, I try to take talk thinking out of the process. I try to let her mind and her body and her magnetism, because our etheric field goes out 5 or 10 feet. And you can know everything just by listening, just by being quiet and resonating with that person. I can't say I don't think about it, but one of the things I realize is that there's a lot of false trails that they don't necessarily throw it out, but let's say the girl has a dysfunctional relationship with her parents or her mother or whoever, and what they see as a good tactic is to get negative attention. Well, it took me 3 years to learn that about, and we've been doing this for what, 22 years. So I had to learn that whole negative attention thing and separate myself from it. But in order to notice the negative attention, I can't be clawing and too close and trying to figure out. I just let the information come to me, and then I see how they react to what they're getting from me. And let me tell you, I'm always giving them the truth. I'm not making this up, because there's certain basic truths, especially in music. But music is so forensic, it's the perfect scalpel to get in there, you know?
That's a really beautiful analogy. It's a perfect scalpel to get in there. Hmm. Do you notice that those lessons that you've been learning and honing over the last 20 years transferred to dealing with adults as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, one of the reasons that I had such a hard time, I think we tried to teach adults for 2 seasons, and I quit. Well, we quit because I found, for example, I was trying to teach this woman, I can't say young woman, she had to be in her 40s or 50s, a chord, like a different position for a chord. And she said, well, I can't do that because that's not the way my dad taught me. And I thought, oh, well, I can't buck that. That's just so ingrained in her. She doesn't want to change it. She doesn't want to learn anything new. She wants to remember her times with her dad. I get it. I get it. But I can't really, like, fight that. Like, you got to do it this way. Oh, I suggest you try, because it's going to help a lot. But I don't want to fight with someone to get them to try a new technique, because all of, doing camp, or actually all of doing life, is trying new techniques to see what'll work. Right.
Right. So kind of like I have two kids, they're 13 and 14, and they're both involved in sports. And the thing that you know, my poor kids, we're like, you got to be coachable. Are you being coachable?
Sure, sure, absolutely. Yeah, I can see that.
Right? Like that's where it starts. If you're not ready to accept the input, then you're not going to improve. And you
Right.
see it in the sports as well.
Absolutely. So, you see that, I mean, basically life is a balancing act. Sometimes you're going a little bit this way, that way. And I have a lot of problems with balance because I only hear and have equilibrium on one side. My left side has always been shut down in with that respect. Now, having said that, I've really learned a lot in other ways. I hear a lot of stuff from the universe. I have to learn balance in a different way, or I have had to learn balance in a different way. So what balance means to me may not be the same to other people, you know? Um, and it's been a sort of sort of the tender point with me, because I have to constantly remind people that, oh, I can't hear you because you're on my deaf side. Or if you see shots of me playing in a band, I'm always on the left. Why does she want to be on that? Isn't she the star of that show? Well,
Because you can't hear.
I can't hear on that side. So, and it's
Well, that I'm sure sometimes that you look at that as a superpower. You're like, okay,
oh
I
yeah,
don't want to talk to this person. I'm going to have them on my right.
you picked right up on that. Somebody else pointed that out to me, but they're absolutely right.
Yeah, right. There's two sides to every coin,
Well,
a
it's
yin and a
interesting
yang.
because, yeah, if I don't ask somebody what they actually said, I realized a long time that what I hear in my head is actually usually a lot more interesting than what the person just said.
Oh, I'm going to use that so much. Oh, yes. What I hear in my head is a lot more interesting. That I'm stealing that from you, June. That is totally,
You can
that's
have
now
it.
mine.
You can have it. So once I realized that, I kind of got a lot more relaxed about the whole thing. If I hear them, okay, maybe I'll be entranced, but probably not.
Yes,
Yes.
yes. I was looking at, and of course I did some homework on you because that's what I do. I do homework, and just going through the roles that you've had. So not only you know, a sister and a daughter and a friend and a bandmate and all of those kinds of roles, but author, musician, activist, producer, director, entrepreneur. I think I even saw something that implied you were an actress too. I mean,
In
good.
one movie, I wasn't very good, but I'll take it.
Well,
It's in
who
my
cares?
resume.
Who
Yeah,
cares? You still did it, you know? I mean, that was still, I'm sure, like an edge that you needed to push yourself off of because you had never done it before, right?
absolutely.
So this is those are all different roles in different industries as well, similar but different industries. Some of them similar, some of them more different than others. What is the common variable, the common skill? Like if you were to tell people, like, listen, I don't care what you're doing, where you're going, what you're planting, what you're sowing, these are the skills that you should be working on.
Well, I mean, for me, it's all focused on music, and music expresses itself in, many different ways. So I have to be sincerely in the receive mode. A lot of people don't realize that when you're performing, you are expecting the audience to be in receive mode, right? You're in give mode, they're in receive mode. But in life, when you're doing music, like you're writing, most of my writing actually is praying, asking for them to give me something. So you have to humble yourself. You have to realize that you're not actually doing it all. It's you're
Huh.
actually not. So you can relax around that, right? And so in co-founding IMA, I co-founded IMA because I kept hearing the voices. And I kind of tried not to listen for about 10 years because there was only one voice at a meeting at a women's music meeting in LA. But 10 years later at Hampshire College, I started to hear more voices and they were coming in my dreams. Now I had to take notice of that. I couldn't just wake up and say, what was that? Nah, I'm not going to listen, because it happened so much. And then I was with Angela Davis actually hanging out in San Francisco, and I told her about these dreams, these voices, and she said, well, get going. And I'm like, what? No, not me. I'm not an activist. I'm not an organizer. I mean, I was clear about that. But then she said, well, they're talking to you. So, which was brilliant, really. And so I got back and I had told Anne somewhat about all this, but I spoke to her seriously about it. And I found out that she had always wanted to be part of an alternative educational institution when she was growing up. So boom, there we went. Me and Anne and Angela Davis and Roma Barron, who was Laurie Anderson's producer, Oh Superman. She produced that. So, we've all been building our pleasure palaces, let's say, based on something that's there but not there. I mean, what is the Me Too movement? What is rights? What are their concepts to begin with? And we turn them into edifices that exist. You can touch, well, not all the time touch, but you can have the illusion that you're touching, but you can manipulate it so as to help yourself or your fellow women, fellow human beings. So there are multiple stages to doing something. And the first one I think is the most important, where you're just dreaming about it. I spent a lot of time dreaming. It looks like I'm not doing anything, but I'm really working. And that's an important concept. I don't think enough people slow down enough to dream and then to start noting the steps that maybe are coming forward. Like in talking about working with the girls, I have to kind of dream into their bodies so that we can speak a different language. Now that's a particular skill that I've developed, and I'm sure a lot of other people have done in the world. You're probably a great teacher. There are many other great teachers, and they know that they're affecting change. Well, how do you affect change, right? You start with dreaming. You really do.
Yeah, and that's you you said another thing that hits me hard is, when you're affecting change, and you see it in, like, for me, the micro facial expressions, right?
Yeah.
you can see it like micro body language. Like you're in a room of 100, 200 people, and you're like you're watching it. It's very draining. I find it very draining because I'm really like trying to pay attention and hit each person, and I want to strike each person in some way so that strike causes a spark. I won't own the spark, it's their spark, but I want that piece. And it's so interesting when you see it, like you're looking around, you're like, that was nothing, it was just like the tiniest little change, but that was their spark. And so yes, you can see it, you can see it when you're mentoring one-on-one, right? Like the tiniest little piece. But I think if we're not paying attention to the whole person, then we miss it and then we become demotivated.
Yeah.
It's now you're gonna make me think a whole bunch more about a bunch more stuff.
Well, that's the weird thing about dreaming. One thing leads to another.
It's true. It's true.
It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
Well, and you spent a long time studying this. I haven't studied what you studied, the Tibetan Buddhism. Is that what you
Well, it's
said?
a study of the nature of reality and truth. So everything is laid bare. That is actually the science of Tibetan Buddhism. It's a science. It's not, I mean, meditation is also a science because it's observing your bodily changes while dealing with all the thoughts that are coming through and somehow putting those thoughts to rest. That's the whole deal right there. And then you can move forward to, other things.
So getting to the bare bones and then being able to move forward, like
Yes.
clearing out the static so you can hone in on what's important.
Well, I mean, you can see so clearly what are the impediments to your progress. There's something that I think in AA or something similar, they say, well, if you have a problem, you're walking down some street and you keep falling to the same hole. Okay, you try to walk around the hole. How about walking down a different street, right? So
Yes.
you can notice the same things in the study of your mind or the study of reality. The same things keep happening and happening, or taking drugs, and you want that one thing that happened that one time, and you keep going after that. What's that all about? I mean, choice. There are choices. Yeah, I know.
Right. Well, and that is interesting, so I have to keep bringing my thoughts also back to the women who build and the conference and the construction industry and all of that, and that what you just said reminds me so much about like you, keeping your head up. There's a always being a squirrel looking around, because if you don't know that if you're not looking and paying attention, you won't even know that there's another street to go down
It's
to avoid that pothole, right? And so that whole you don't know what you don't know. And I think that saying is such a good example of something that seems so simple, like, oh yeah, you don't know what you don't know. But if you just sit down and think about the implications of what that means, it can really be quite a long thought process. Like, you don't know what you don't know. Well, why don't I know? How do I know? When do I know? How do I find out what I don't know? Oh my God, I don't
yeah.
know.
Why did I forget what I just knew? That's
Yes, yes.
how did I forget that I had it a month ago? I had
Right.
the revelation, and here I am being a stupid whatever, again.
Yes, 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 yes. And in even that, the knowing doing gap. Why is it that we struggle so much with doing what we know we're supposed to do, or doing
Because
what we know is going to
the
help
busy
us?
mind, the busy mind keeps getting in between. It's called the monkey mind. There's a drawing or a mental simulation that you do where you see a monkey dragging a person. That monkey's the mind, right? And as you meditate, right, then the monkey is a little bit closer. Then the monkey's on your shoulder, and then finally the monkey's behind you. The monkey's not leading you. And that basically the monkey mind is chattering all the time, telling you you're wrong, or why did you think that, or no, they don't really like you, or that thought sucks, etc. That all gets in the way. So the point of quieting the mind is to get beyond that, is to get, or you don't even need to get beyond that. They're just not there. You just put them aside. They're still there. See, that's the thing I love about Buddhism that I learned. This is what I learned. They're still there, but you're not paying attention to them. Therefore, they're no longer a problem.
I like it. Yes. I'm going to subscribe to your newsletter.
Just read Chogyam Trungpa.
Oh, okay.
Breaking through spiritual materialism. I saw that title. It was probably the 80s. I thought, oh, what's that? Breaking through spiritual materialism. Whoa, I got to find out what that's about. You know, all these little revelations that have come to me that they're all true. You know, you do not have to listen to your mind because most of the time it's lying to you. It wants to control you. That's why people do foolish and stupid things around also gaining power. You know, that's not the deal.
Right.
Yeah.
I think we could talk forever, you and I.
Yeah, you should come here sometime.
You can't say stuff like that to me because I show up.
Ocean, not far from you, I'm so sure.
I totally show up. I bring my dog and everything.
Absolutely. We have a dog too.
Yeah. Well, June, why did you say yes to speaking at the Women Who Build?
You know, that's an interesting question, and I do love that question. It's pretty much because they asked, and I was interested in why they asked. I was just simply interested. I knew nothing about what the milieu was or the medium or anything, but they asked, and I thought, well, that's interesting. They must think I have something to contribute. Let me investigate that.
So I will tell you that one of the superpowers of the Construction Institute, so Women Who Build is a signature program within the Construction Institute. And
there is an actual constructional institute?
Yes.
Oh.
It's the Construction Institute. Okay. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about.
What part of the Construction Institute do you have?
I'm on the board of directors for the Construction Institute. So, you know, a lot of industry organizations are like very specific to the role, right? So like you might have like in construction, you might have mechanical engineers association and quality engineers association or whatever, like very specific. Like the architects who are designing everything, they kind of have their own grouping of associations. The engineers have their own grouping. The construction managers, the trades, which are the construction managers kind of manage multiple trades. The trades would be like the electricians and the carpenters, and they'll all have their
plumbers. Are plumbers in the trades?
Oh yeah, plumbers, electricians. It goes on and on.
Heat and air conditioning.
Yeah, like the securities. Okay. You know, like there's a ton of them. The water guy. Anyway, it goes on and on. But there's like these organizations that are very. I'll use the word silo. I don't like to use that word because it has a negative connotation, and it doesn't have to be negative, but specialized, right? The Construction Institute is one of the very, very few that doesn't care about those boundaries. They're connecting across all of them. So in the room with you in April, you're going to have owners. So the people who are spending the dollars on construction, they're the ones that say, I need a new hospital or a new museum or a new whatever. And they hire the architects who will also be in this room with you. And the architects will do the major design, and then they'll bring in engineers to like work up the details, like how do these darn things connect? And then they'll hire a construction manager to manage all of the other trades and contractors to actually get the thing built. But then the trades are the ones doing the actual building. Mm-hmm. All of those people are gonna be in that room. And that's one of the unique parts of the Construction Institute. It goes across. And they started the first Women Who Build Summit, happened in 2017.
Wow.
Yes. And it was, I got to be on a panel in that one. So I got to see it from its very first, which was cool. So it was like 80 people, I think. There was one man there. He was the husband of the keynote speaker. and he was just there in his role to carry her purse, and he was so awesome about it. And we all like that. Well, year on year, it's just grown and grown and grown. And I think that we had to change venues because so many people. So now but before COVID, we hit about 300, and there were 15-20% men there.
Wow.
And things slowed down, because of COVID. Last year, it was the first conference that a lot of people attended in person, and it was still pretty darn good. I think it was in the 180, but we need to get, more and more people coming. And it is the Women Who Build Summit, but it's more about elevating women in construction. It's not about like, we want the men to be there, right? Because it's a partnership. It's everything changes together, and we will all rise together.
Talk too much about getting into construction. Am I right about that? Or is it changing? Is that a goal? Like a girl thinks of, oh, I wish I could be an astronaut, but maybe I could be in construction.
It is so. Yes and no. There
Okay.
are not many girls that are talking, I want to be an electrician. That is actually one of the primary challenges the industry has, as the generation gap in the workforce is increasing more and more. I think that what are the statistics? Like 40% of the trade workers, like the electricians, the carpenters, all of that, they're going to be retired in the next 10 years, and
Oh,
there's
really?
nowhere near enough in the pipeline. So that would be for the trades, right? However, the engineering students are often who end up, I'm an industrial engineer.
Okay.
And when I got my degree, I was one of two women who graduated with an industrial engineering degree. That wasn't all that long ago. That was
How
1998.
many men? How many men?
In my specific class, I think there were like 200, 250. Like when we walked down the aisle together, right? It was like that many. Now the numbers are drastically different. Drastically different. Way more women are going into engineering, and that pipeline fills a lot of construction.
Right. Okay. That's good
Yeah,
to know.
yeah. No,
Well, I mean,
it's
what do you think? What do you think you or anybody else is expecting to hear from me? What would be the most useful?
well. First of all, I think you being authentic. I don't want to coach you in
No,
this.
no,
How do you
no.
like
Thank
that?
you.
I don't,
Oh,
because
no,
I
I
think
love it. I love it.
you bring you, and I was thinking about this a lot because I really struggled with what kinds of questions. How can I be of value to June? How can I bring value with this conversation to you, right? And I was thinking about it, so I have two uncles who are in the music industry, and one uncle's an agent. And I know that that's a highly competitive market. I know that it has been male dominated for forever, right? Like all of it. Um, and there are parallels, I think, to construction, and really, that whole grit and mindset, and what it takes to just keep standing up, shoulders back, and like, yeah, you're gonna lose sometimes, right?
That's what
And
rock and roll's about. You're gonna lose.
yes, and we get calloused. And I mean, it's changed so much in construction, and I'm sure it's changed in the industry you're in. It just seems like the
Hasn't
men
changed.
are different now, the women are
Hasn't-
different
It
now.
hasn't changed so much in the music industry.
Okay, well then you're perfectly, I mean,
Yeah.
there are some places, we have people I see on social media all the time that are saying that there's no problem, there's no gender gap, there's no anything. And I'm like, I don't know what you guys are smoking. They're
Yeah,
probably,
really.
it's still there. But
No, that's
this
great.
conference is not about male bashing. It's about like sharing ideas, and what worked for you, June, to overcome those stereotypes, because we have a great deal of racial inequity in construction. It's not just gender inequity.
Right.
Oh, and don't even get started about, LGBT in construction. And so there's a lot of room to grow with diversity, and the power of diversity, I think similar it's the power is across the board. But when you co-write music or you co-write lyrics or whatever, you get that synergy going. Well, imagine designing a high rise in the middle of a city. You're not going to do that alone. You're not going to have all the right ideas alone, right? You have to get different thinkers. Oh, this worked for me in Dubai. This worked for me in Tokyo. This worked for me in Salt Lake City. And where are we now today? And it takes that, right? I
Yeah,
think there are
and
more.
cross communication as well. That's
Oh,
got to
yeah. I think there are more similarities in your experiences to what the women in construction also go through than there are differences.
Yeah.
I absolutely believe that.
I already have so much respect for all of them. I really do. I mean, when I stop to think of it, I'm like, holy shit, that's got to be rough. Even if you're a brain, it's got to be rough. You know.
But it's rough in the same way that it was rough for you, I'm sure.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Excellent musician, excellent singer.
Yeah.
You did all the hard work. You did everything else. You're standing on the stage with, I don't know, the Rolling Stones, and they're just as new as you are, right? And yet they get the attention and you don't,
Mhm.
right? Like what's and
Well,
that's
I just read a review that was written in 1975, 1971, the first time we played in London. And we were actually going to Europe to record at the Beatles' Apple Studio. And in conjunction with that, we appeared on Beat Club, which has all our most popular videos out there. Like,
I've been watching.
and but we played like the next night a gig, and the review of that gig is, it just makes my blood boil. It is so condescending. Like, he might say something nice, this guy Michael Watts, he might say something nice, but he'd then give another sentence where he'd wipe that out and do the condescending thing, letting us know that no, he didn't care about the fact that actually we were good. I mean, for example, he said, I almost thought that they were playing to a backing track. That's a compliment. Their sound was so clean, they played so well. Then the next line he says, but that could have been the sound man. Just, you just want to throttle that guy. They couldn't give us any type of praise and let it stand, and that was really hard for us to endure. Now I'm understanding that more, but that goes around the mansplaining. That's mansplaining. Okay.
Yeah, but the way that you had to navigate those waters, and I mean, I'm sure you would agree when those things happen. Our first filter is an emotional filter, right? Like oh,
Right.
come here, I'm gonna. But then you got to sit back and say, okay, so that's there. I see it and it's there. So what am I going to do about it, right? How am I going to respond, adjust, pivot, whatever, whatever, whatever. I really think there's way more similarities than differences.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really fun to talk to you because, I've really been interested in seeing where uh, the problems or the complications juxtapose between construction and music, because we're all constructing something. It's
Mm-hmm.
just the ways and means in construction. I mean, I would have imagined, or just, have a lot more danger associated. I mean, if the electricity just pops in a building, we don't ever do that unless you're so stupid that you play in the rain.
Yeah, well, and that is something that, every single second you're on a job site, you're at risk.
Right, right.
And every single, and it doesn't matter who you are, you're at risk personally, but your family is at risk too,
That's
because
right.
you might not come home to them as well as you left.
Right.
And so there is a great deal to and to really ponder and think about. And there's so much technology, so many times people are working to improve the processes and make things more safe. I mean, just housekeeping on a job site can reduce the risk of injury by multipliers. But it's really difficult to change that many people all the time. And I think that one of the reasons is that every time a new job is being built, it's a new team that's working together. So you don't get that continuity that goes through.
Right. Wow.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, I would imagine that it's like producing a record. You don't always have the same producers.
Yeah, that's very. In fact, the only thing I can think that's close to that is Steven Spielberg has pretty much the same crew every movie, and that's why he's able to work so fast and get the results he does. But if you're producing, yeah, you got a different. Well, you might not necessarily have. Maybe you could just hire the same engineer, but you have a different set of people. So I get that. Definitely.
Right? So it's a different team every time. So you got to learn from each other. You got the street cred, you got the teamwork, you got the collab, like all of it.
It's amazing that you guys get the job done. I mean, when I think about it, golly.
It's funny you say. So I've been in construction. I tripped and fell into construction. I wasn't supposed to be in construction. It was an accident. And I call it the construction miracle, because the more just like the Christmas miracle, right? The more you know about it, the more you're like, how the heck? And so many people outside of the industry, they think of construction as, that parking lot that's all torn up, or the road work that's all torn up, and oh, that's construction.
Right.
No, no. Yes, no. That work that's actually happening in the field represents probably 2 or 3 years of work before that, and it also represents another several months after that.
Yeah.
So the life cycle and the amount of jobs and people that are impacted by a single shovel in the dirt, that is the construction industry. It's not just the people in the vests, but the people in the vests are the most important ones.
Okay.
Did I just give you way too much information now?
No, because I was thinking just the job of a person who studies, I'm just making this up, stress management of buildings. Like the stresses, how they
that's civil engineer. Yes,
okay.
like the wind and
right. So that's got to be very specialized. The person putting in the air conditioning is not really going to be thinking of that. They're following a different path, right? But they all have to come together to make it work. That's what I find fascinating.
Yeah.
Where is the nexus that makes it all work? So there's got to be a construction manager or a company that has a construction. There's got to be one or two people who actually know everything. Am I right?
Depends on the stage of the job. So what you're getting to is one of the things that is the most challenging part about construction. So you have somebody who, just think about a house. Don't even think about the rest of it, right? Because it's too mind-blowing. It really is too mind-blowing. It's like, so say you decide you want to put a barn with a stage on your property, right? So you're the owner and you make all the decisions, but you have to hire an architect that designs like the shell and the foundation, and this is how you're going to approach it, and these are like the permits that you have to get and all that other crud. But then you need the electrical work, you need all of that. So a designer has to go in and say, oh, we've got to make sure that we can fit duct work in these walls and in the ceilings. So it gets more specific, right? But they've left room for duct work, but you need a mechanical company to go in and figure out, okay, this is how the ductwork has to be turned and fit, and what goes into it, and how it comes down, and where the electricity, like all of that stuff. And it just goes on and on and on. And so construction is very much like, it's almost like a funnel, sort of, where like big idea, big drawings, small, refine until poof.
Well, it also sounds like a dance.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that's why the industry is so compelling. And that's why it's really cool that you're going to be in a room with all of those people. And that's the difference. Remember, I was describing how Construction Institute is different, because many of these in the construction industry would just be one aspect. This is everybody in the funnel.
awesome. I'm really looking forward to it. I
I'm
mean, to
so
look into these people's eyes and see what kind of people are doing this and facing up to these. I see them as extreme challenges, not only being good at your job, but knowing how important it is to work together with every single section that has something to do with anything. You know, when
yes.
you okay, sorry, go ahead.
No, no. And I mean, so think about, a lot of my questions that I was thinking to ask you were like, how are you building these relationships every time you change all these different roles, blah, blah, blah. What's the common thing throughout? Because I know that in construction, the whole universe is about communicating and building relationships and keeping your confidence, keeping your skills at the edge, right? So, but you had to do that too.
Yeah, yeah,
Same.
yeah. I don't know that we have to do to the extent that you guys do, because for to do a job, all those relationships and all those cross currents have to come together in some way, in some place, right?
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if we need to do that so much in music unless you're a huge business executive, right? If you're running Atlantic Records, that's different from the bass player in Chicago. You know what I'm saying? That's very different.
Yeah, but the scale is kind of the same and it's
Yeah.
similar. Like if you're doing your own private label with music, the analogy would be you're going to build a barn on your property
Mhm.
versus
Yeah.
you're going to, do something else. And I think it scales similarly.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Because when you're the bass player in Chicago, you got to know all the other great bass players whom you're competing with.
Yeah, and so do all the electricians,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
The
That's
electricians need to know all the good ones
yeah.
to help them execute that job.
So did they think of it that way of keeping up these making relationships, keeping them? Um,
Very much so. Very much so. I don't know that everybody quite contextualizes it in their head in those words,
yeah.
but you will often hear like, okay, here's an issue we're going to talk about, like, oh, I don't know, we're falling behind schedule and this material's not there, or it was delivered and it doesn't fit. So those kinds of things, right? And so then many times you'll hear, I know a guy, I know the right guy. And that's where it manifests itself, because they do, or it's like, oh, this is a really tough one, let me make sure that Sally and Billy are on this particular crew because they have the exact skills that are needed for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is a fascinating conversation for me. I feel like I'm learning so much.
I just love talking to you, it's great, and I'm so glad that you were willing to